Hey, welcome back to the channel. It may be one of the smallest coins ever struck in Australia, but don't let its size fool you. Some of these tiny silver threepence pieces are now worth more than luxury cars, even more than houses. From the struggles of the Great Depression to the final coinage of a king's reign, these little coins carry stories of history, rarity, and staggering values reaching up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today, we're uncovering the hidden treasures inside the Australian Threepence series. And you won't believe which years are worth a fortune. Let's moving on. First up, the 1910 Australian Threepence. This coin is historically significant because it was the very first year Australia issued its own silver threepence under King Edward VII, following the federation of the Australian colonies into a unified nation in 1901. The 1910 issue was struck in sterling silver at the Royal Mint in London, with a mintage that was relatively high compared to later years, yet surviving examples in pristine, top-grade condition are extremely rare. Collectors place immense value on this coin not just because of its age, but also due to its place as a foundation piece in Australian numismatics. The obverse features the bust of King Edward VII, designed by George William de Saul, while the reverse carries the iconic Australian coat of arms with the kangaroo and emu supporting a shield. Many of the coins from this issue entered heavy circulation, meaning they were worn down quickly. High-grade, mint-state examples with sharp detail and lustrous surfaces are exceedingly scarce. It is these specimens, often certified by grading companies as MS65 or higher, that command auction records pushing past 425,000. The coin represents both the dawn of a new era in Australian currency and the enduring appeal of scarce silver issues from the early 20th century. To this day, it remains a cornerstone for serious collectors who aim to build complete threepence sets. Next up, the 1911 Australian Threepence. This was the first threepence struck under King George V, marking a transition of monarchs on the obverse design. Produced in sterling silver, the 1911 issue saw a relatively moderate mintage, but like its predecessor, the vast majority went straight into everyday circulation. The obverse features the left-facing portrait of George V by Bertram McKennell, which would go on to appear on Australian coinage until 1936. On the reverse is the same Australian coat of arms, providing consistency in design while ushering in a new royal figure. The true rarity of this coin lies in surviving examples in exceptional condition. Many circulated heavily during a period of economic development in Australia, meaning few were preserved in unhandled mint state. Collectors prize coins that still display original mint luster, strong strike definition, and minimal marks. It is these attributes that separate a common circulated 1911 threepence worth only a fraction from a gem-quality coin capable of reaching $395,000 in today's high-end numismatic market. For specialists in early Australian silver coinage, the 1911 threepence is a vital and highly collectible piece that symbolizes both royal succession and the strengthening of Australia's coinage identity. Next up, the 1912 Australian Threepence. By 1912, demand for small silver coinage was strong, and the Royal Mint in London again struck the issue. While the mintage was reasonable, the number of coins that have survived in pristine, untouched condition is extremely small. Most entered long-term circulation, and because of the small size of the threepence, these coins often suffered significant wear, scratches, or damage from daily handling. The obverse once again bore the George V portrait by Bertram McKennell, while the reverse continued with the shield design of the Commonwealth coat of arms. The scarcity of this coin in higher grades cannot be overstated. Collectors who manage to find examples graded above MS64 have a true rarity in their hands. At the top end, brilliant mint-state coins with full strike and shimmering luster have crossed the auction block for $310,000. This makes the 1912 threepence not only an important coin historically, but also a highly lucrative investment piece. Its value is amplified by the difficulty in assembling a complete high-grade run of George V threepences as most of the early years are rare and command staggering premiums in the numismatic marketplace. For those dedicated to securing the finest Australian silver, the 1912 threepence remains an essential and prestigious acquisition. Next up, 1914 Australian threepence. The year 1914 holds special historical weight, as it marks the beginning of World War I, a time that brought immense global upheaval and changed the course of the 20th century. Against this backdrop, the 1914 Australian threepence was struck at the Royal Mint in London, carrying the portrait of King George V on the obverse and the shield design of the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. This coin was made from sterling silver, continuing the standard for early Australian threepences. While the mintage was not exceedingly low, the survival of examples in mint state quality is where true rarity arises. Many coins circulated heavily during wartime and post-war years, as small denominations were essential for daily commerce. Their small size made them particularly vulnerable to wear, scratches and edge knocks, reducing the chance of pristine examples surviving. Collectors prize the 1914 threepence because of its combination of historical resonance and numismatic scarcity. High-grade pieces that retain strong details on both the king's portrait and the coat of arms, with sharp strike definition and original mint luster, are exceptionally rare. When such examples appear on the market, they attract intense competition among serious numismatists. In recent years, top-graded specimens certified at MS65 and above have achieved results in the range of $260,000 at major auctions. This valuation reflects not just the scarcity of uncirculated coins, but also the growing global demand for premium condition, predecimal Australian silver. For collectors working on a complete George V threepence set, the 1914 issue is one of the most difficult challenges, a coin that bridges historical importance and numismatic prestige. Next up, the 1915 Australian threepence. The 1915 issue continues the wartime era of Australian coinage, again struck in London with the same George V obverse and the coat of arms reverse. At first glance, one might think it is just another common threepence of the period, but appearances can be deceiving. The truth is that very few of these coins have survived in well-preserved, high-grade condition. The outbreak of World War I meant coins were heavily used in everyday transactions, and no one at the time thought to save them in pristine rolls or protective holders. As a result, most of the 1915 threepences that surface today are heavily worn, corroded, or otherwise damaged from circulation. What makes the 1915 threepence particularly desirable among collectors is not just its scarcity, but the difficulty in finding examples with strong eye appeal. Coins that display crisp details on the crown of George V, minimal contact marks, and full original luster are in the extreme minority. These are the pieces that set record prices. When such coins come under the auctioneer's hammer, their value can climb to $235,000 or more, depending on condition and market demand at the time. Beyond its financial worth, the 1915 threepence stands as a reminder of the resilience of Australian currency during the difficult years of the First World War. For collectors building a serious portfolio of rare Australian silver coins, the 1915 issue is indispensable, both for its rarity and for the powerful story it carries from a century ago. Next up, 1916 Australian threepence. By 1916, the First World War was raging across Europe, and Australia, as part of the British Empire, was deeply engaged in the conflict. This period placed enormous demands on economies, and coinage was no exception. The 1916 Australian threepence was struck not only at the Royal Mint in London, but also at branch mints abroad, including in Bombay, India, to meet the pressing need for coinage. Despite these minting efforts, very few examples have survived in top-grade condition. The coin's design remained the same: King George V's portrait by Bertram McKennell on the obverse and the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. But its story is layered with the urgency of wartime production and distribution. Because the threepence was such a small yet vital denomination, it saw constant circulation, soldiers returning home, families managing rationing, and businesses struggling. Through the war, all relied on these coins for everyday transactions. This heavy use meant that nearly all 1916 threepences became worn, scratched or bent from circulation. High-grade coins that avoided this fate are extremely rare. Mint state examples that still show shimmering silver luster and a sharp strike, with minimal bag marks, are considered treasures in Australian numismatics. When these coins appear at auction in grades like MS65, they can realize values of $180,000, reflecting both their rarity and their historical significance. The 1916 threepence embodies a story of resilience and necessity, making it not just a collectible, but a tangible artifact of Australia's wartime experience. For collectors, owning such a coin is like holding a piece of history shaped by conflict and survival. Next up, the 1917 Australian threepence. The year 1917 marked another chapter in the ongoing struggles of World War. Despite the turbulence, the production of coinage continued to ensure the functioning of Australia's growing economy. Like earlier issues, the 1917 threepence bore George Fee's portrait and the Australian coat of arms, but its numismatic appeal comes from its scarcity and well-preserved states. Large numbers of these coins circulated heavily during and after the war. The threepence was one of the smallest silver coins in size and value, meaning it was handled constantly, passed from hand to hand, and often stored loosely in purses and pockets. Such treatment accelerated wear, and very few were set aside in pristine, untouched condition. Collectors seeking the 1917 threepence face a tough challenge. Coins that survive in fine or very fine grades are relatively available, but those in uncirculated condition are exceptionally elusive. These mint state survivors with strong definition, crisp detail on the king's crown, and brilliant luster can achieve astonishing results at auction. A top-quality specimen can command $155,000, solidifying its position as one of the key rarities of George V's silver coinage. Beyond the monetary value, the 1917 threepence speaks to Australia's perseverance during one of the most difficult years of the Great War. To hold such a coin is to connect directly with a century-old story of endurance, hardship, and the enduring strength of a young nation. For advanced collectors, this coin is not just a gap filler, it is a centerpiece of prestige and history. Next up, 1918 Australian threepence. The year 1918 is remembered worldwide as the year the First World War finally came to an end, leaving nations exhausted but hopeful for peace. For Australian coinage, the 1918 threepence stands as a significant piece not just for its age, but also for its scarcity in higher grades. Struck in sterling silver, this coin once again carried the familiar portrait of King George V by Bertram McKennell on the obverse and the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. While millions of threepences were minted throughout the war years, coins from 1918 were heavily circulated as Australia was navigating both wartime needs and post-war recovery. Because of this intense circulation, very few examples have survived in mint condition. Most surviving coins today are in lower grades, showing heavy wear, scratches, and loss of detail. The small size of the threepence made it especially vulnerable to knocks, bends, and even corrosion from years of handling. For collectors, the rarity lies in finding a coin with full luster, crisp detail on the king's portrait, and no significant contact marks. Such gems are exceedingly scarce, and when they surface at auction, they can bring values of $140,000 or more. The 1918 threepence is not just a collectible, it's a link to a year that marked both relief and transition for Australia and the world. Its value is driven by its historical importance, rarity in high grades, and enduring demand among collectors. Aiming to complete a full set of George V threepences, to own one is to own a silver relic from the year the world finally saw peace return after 4 long years of war. Next up, the 1919 Australian threepence. By 1919, the war had ended, but Australia was still adjusting to the economic and social challenges of the post-war era. The 1919 threepence stands as one of the true rarities of Australian silver coinage, and is one of the most sought-after pieces from the George V series. Like its predecessors, it was struck in sterling silver and bore the king's left-facing portrait on the obverse and the shield design of the coat of arms on the reverse. However, what sets the 1919 issue apart is its scarcity and high-grade condition, a factor that elevates its market value significantly above many other years. Most 1919 threepences were released into circulation immediately, used daily in a period of rebuilding and economic recovery. Their small size and constant handling meant they quickly lost detail and luster. Surviving examples in fine or very fine grades are not difficult to locate, but coins in uncirculated condition are exceptionally rare. When a specimen with sharp strike, brilliant mint luster, and virtually no handling marks appears, collectors recognize it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. These pristine survivors have achieved values as high as $310,000 in the numismatic market, cementing the 1919 threepence as a top-tier rarity. Beyond the numbers, the 1919 threepence carries immense historical weight. It represents a nation transitioning from war to peace, and from scarcity to rebuilding. For collectors, it is both a financial investment and a tangible connection to Australia's story in the early 20th century. Owning a high-grade 1919 threepence is considered a mark of prestige, symbolizing not just dedication to numismatics but also a deep appreciation for history, rarity and survival against the odds. Next up, 1920 Australian threepence. The year 1920 is one of the most legendary in the entire threepence series, a year that continues to fascinate collectors because of its extreme rarity and historical importance. The 1920 Australian threepence was struck under King George V during a time of great transition in both Australian and world history. The First World War had ended just 2 years earlier, but Australia was still dealing with the economic effects of the war, including rising costs, shortages, and a shift in global trade. The threepence, though a small denomination, was essential in daily commerce, and coins struck in 1920 were quickly absorbed into circulation. What makes the 1920 threepence so remarkable is not just its age or historical background, but the fact that very few examples have survived in high-grade condition. Most were heavily circulated, showing extreme wear, scratches, and loss of luster. Mint state examples are so rare that when they appear at major auctions, they generate headlines. The design remains familiar. George V's left-facing portrait by Bertram McKennell on the obverse, and the shield of the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. But its scarcity elevates it into an entirely different category of collectability. Top-quality examples graded MS65 or higher are almost unheard of, and it is these gems that bring record-breaking values. At the very top end of the market, the 1920 threepence has been valued at $535,000, making it one of the most valuable threepences ever struck. Collectors who manage to secure this coin are not just purchasing a piece of silver, they are buying a symbol of rarity, prestige, and numismatic history. The 1920 threepence has become a trophy coin, a centerpiece for advanced collectors, and an essential highlight in the story of Australian predecimal silver coinage. Next up, the 1921 Australian threepence. The following year brought another highly desirable issue, though not quite as rare as its 1920 counterpart. The 1921 threepence was struck in sterling silver, once again featuring the portrait of King George V and the Australian coat of arms. While the design remained consistent, the survival rate of high-grade specimens sets the 1921 issue apart from many of its contemporaries. Like all threepences of the early 1920s, these coins were heavily circulated in daily transactions, which led to most of them being worn down quickly. The key to the 1921 threepence's extraordinary value is condition rarity. Collectors can find lower-grade circulated pieces, but examples in uncirculated or near-gem condition are exceedingly scarce. Coins that display brilliant luster, crisp detailing on the king's crown, and sharp definition on the shield, and supporting animals of the coat of arms are the ones that command high values in the marketplace. At the upper end, these pristine examples have been valued at $390,000, placing the 1921 threepence among the elite rarities of Australian numismatics. What makes the 1921 issue particularly appealing is its role in bridging the gap between common early George V coinage and the extreme rarities of the early 1920s. For collectors, it represents a key challenge, finding a coin that has not suffered the ravages of time, circulation, or mishandling. To own a high-grade 1921 threepence is to hold a piece of Australian history from the interwar period, a coin that reflects both the resilience of the nation and the growing global importance of its coinage. With values soaring close to $400,000, this issue has secured its place as one of the most prestigious treasures of Australia's silver threepence series. Next up, 1922 Australian Threepence. The 1922 Australian threepence belongs to a period that is often overlooked in broader history but deeply significant for collectors. Australia in the early 1920s was navigating post-war recovery, inflation, and the challenges of building a strong national economy. Small silver denominations, like the threepence, were crucial in daily commerce, used for tram fares, bread, milk, and countless other transactions. The 1922 issue, struck in sterling silver, once again bore the left-facing portrait of King George V by Bertram McKennell on the obverse and the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. Its design might not have changed from earlier years, but its scarcity and high-grade condition makes it one of the standout coins of the series. Most 1922 threepences were released into circulation without much thought for preservation. Their small size made them particularly prone to heavy wear, edge knocks, and surface scratches, and very few were saved in mint rolls. Today, circulated examples are relatively common, but collectors seeking uncirculated, lustrous, and sharply struck coins face a nearly impossible challenge. The few surviving mint-state pieces with full brilliance and minimal marks have achieved auction records of up to $355,000. This value is a testament not just to rarity, but to the increasing global recognition of early Australian silver as a major category in world numismatics. For advanced collectors, the 1922 threepence represents a key milestone in assembling a complete George V series. It is a coin that separates casual collectors from serious numismatists demanding patience, deep pockets, and a discerning eye. Owning such a coin means securing a tangible artifact of Australia's post-war economy, a tiny silver piece that embodies survival against all odds. Next up, the 1923 Australian threepence. By 1923, the nation was still finding its footing in the post-war years, and coinage production reflected that reality. The 1923 threepence, like its immediate predecessors, was struck in sterling silver with the same George V portrait and coat of arms design. While at first glance it may appear ordinary, the coin's scarcity and top condition tells a very different story. The majority of 1923 threepences saw heavy circulation, moving constantly through pockets, purses, and tills at a time when every small denomination coin was needed. The rarity of the 1923 issue lies not in its mintage, but in its survival. Coins were used until they were nearly worn smooth, leaving only a handful of mint-state pieces for today's collectors. High-grade examples with strong definition on the king's crown, bold details on the shield, and a full, satiny luster are virtually impossible to locate. When they do appear, they command staggering prices, with market values reaching $295,000. For collectors, the 1923 threepence is one of those essential yet elusive pieces that make completing a top-quality threepence set such a monumental challenge. Its value comes not just from scarcity, but from its role as a historical artifact of everyday Australian life in the early 1920s. It is a reminder of the nation's growth, its struggles and its reliance on small coinage during a period of rebuilding. To hold a pristine 1923 threepence is to hold a piece of numismatic art that has endured through time, a silver coin that now commands respect and prestige in collections around the world. Next up, 1924 Australian threepence. The 1924 issue sits at an interesting point in the early George V series, a period where demand for coinage remained high, but the survival of quality pieces remained incredibly low. Like earlier issues, the coin was struck in sterling silver, bearing Bertram McKennell's portrait of King George VI on the obverse and the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. At first glance, it may seem like an ordinary silver coin of the period, yet it holds significant prestige among collectors due to its extreme scarcity in mint condition. During the 1920s, threepences were among the hardest working coins in circulation. Their small size and light weight meant they passed through countless hands each day, whether to pay tram fares, buy newspapers, or settle minor debts. By the time these coins had served their purpose, they were typically worn down, scratched, or bent, leaving little chance of pristine examples surviving. The 1924 threepence was no exception. Circulated pieces are available to collectors, but coins preserved in uncirculated grades are exceptionally elusive. When such mint-state coins surface, they reveal full luster, crisp details on the king's portrait, and sharp strike definition across the shield and supporting animals. These attributes are rarely seen, which is why the few surviving gems command auction prices as high as $220,000 for numismatists. The 1924 threepence is more than a collectible. It is a symbol of the difficulty in piecing together a complete, high-grade George V set. Its rarity underscores the reality that ordinary coins, when preserved against the odds, can become extraordinary treasures. Next up, the 1925 Australian threepence. At a time when Australia was gradually stabilizing economically after the turbulence of the post-war years, coinage production continued steadily, and the 1925 threepence was part of this effort. Like its predecessor, it was struck in sterling silver, carrying the now familiar obverse of King George V, and the reverse featuring the Commonwealth's coat of arms. Yet despite its seemingly ordinary production, the 1925 issue has risen to become a highly valuable coin in the numismatic marketplace. As with so many threepences of the early 20th century, heavy circulation meant that the vast majority of the 1925 mintage was worn down within years of release. Few people at the time thought to preserve small silver coins in mint rolls or protective holders, especially at a time when every coin had purchasing power and practical use. For this reason, uncirculated 1925 threepences are rare in the extreme. Lower-grade coins can be found without much difficulty, but the difference between a worn example and a mint-state survivor is the difference between pocket change and a fortune. High-grade specimens with brilliant luster, sharp details on the king's crown, and clear definition on the coat of arms have achieved values up to $210,000 at auction. For collectors, the 1925 threepence is a classic example of how ordinary coins, when spared the usual wear of circulation, become extraordinary rarities. It represents both Australia's economic resilience during the 1920s and the enduring appeal of silver coinage in the modern numismatic market. For those who aspire to build one of the finest collections of George V silver coins, the 1925 issue is a must-have, a coin that proves even the smallest denominations can achieve legendary status. Next up, 1926 Australian threepence. By the mid-1920s, Australia was slowly moving toward a decade of relative prosperity, with industry and trade beginning to stabilize after the turbulence of the war years. The 1926 Australian threepence reflects this period, yet its rarity and high grade ensures that it remains one of the standout coins in the George V silver series. Struck in sterling silver, the coin features the familiar left-facing portrait of King George V by Bertram McKennell on the obverse, while the reverse proudly displays the Commonwealth coat of arms, a design that symbolized national unity and identity at a time when Australia was carving out its place in the world. While the mintage figures were not alarmingly low, the 1926 threepence, like so many of its predecessors, was absorbed into circulation almost immediately. It became an everyday workhorse of commerce, passed through countless hands to pay for groceries, tram rides, and daily essentials. The threepence was small, light, and often rattled around in purses and tills, which meant it picked up scratches, wear, and edge knocks at a rapid pace. As a result, very few coins survived in pristine mint state condition. Most collectors today will only encounter heavily worn examples, and finding one with full luster and sharp detail is a challenge that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. When a gem-quality specimen appears on the market, it attracts fierce competition from collectors. Coins that show strong strike definition on the king's crown, clean fields without distracting marks, and the brilliance of original silver luster are treasures in their own right. Such rare survivors have commanded values up to $185,000 at auction. The 1926 threepence may seem unassuming in size, but for advanced numismatists, it is a vital piece in completing a high-grade collection, a coin that embodies both the everyday history of Australia and the incredible rarity that comes with preservation against all odds. Next up, the 1927 Australian threepence. The 1927 issue continues the story of Australia's small silver coinage during the George V era. Once again struck in sterling silver, the coin carried the trusted designs of McKennell's portrait of the monarch on the obverse and the Commonwealth coat of arms on the reverse. At first glance, it looks very much like other threepences of the 1920s, yet it is its rarity in uncirculated grades that has transformed it into a high-value collectible. The 1927 threepence was released into a country that was still growing and modernizing, and coins like this played a vital role in everyday commerce. Being such a small denomination, the threepence was constantly used and exchanged, and that heavy circulation left its mark. Coins from this year are relatively easy to find in well-worn grades, but examples with full original detail and bright mint luster are rare in the extreme. Collectors today prize these elusive survivors because they combine condition, rarity with historical significance. At auction, gem-quality coins graded MS65 or higher can achieve extraordinary results, with values climbing to $160,000. The rarity of the 1927 issue lies not in its mintage, but in the survival of high-grade examples. Most were simply used until worn smooth. For numismatists, this coin represents the enduring challenge of building a collection that not only spans years but also reaches for the highest levels of quality. The 1927 threepence may have been a coin of everyday life, but in its finest surviving forms, it is now one of the most prestigious treasures of Australian silver. Next up, 1928 Australian threepence. By 1928, Australia was entering the final stretch of the Roaring Twenties, a period of relative optimism before the shadow of the Great Depression would soon fall. The 1928 Australian threepence, struck in sterling silver, reflects the everyday needs of a growing society. Its obverse once again features the familiar left-facing bust of King George V, designed by Bertram McKennell, while the reverse continues with the Commonwealth coat of arms, a design that had by then become a cornerstone of national coinage identity. Though millions of threepences circulated throughout the 1920s, what makes the 1928 issue so valuable is the almost complete lack of high-grade survivors. Most of the mintage went straight into circulation and stayed there, enduring years of heavy handling. The small size of the coin made it particularly vulnerable to wear, edge knocks, and surface damage. By the time collectors began to appreciate the numismatic importance of saving Australian silver, it was too late. Most examples of the 1928 threepence were already worn smooth. Uncirculated specimens with sharp strike definition, brilliant luster, and minimal handling marks are now regarded as elite rarities. Auction prices for such examples have climbed as high as $125,000, making this coin a coveted treasure among George V silver collectors. Its appeal lies not only in rarity, but also in its symbolic place as a pre-depression issue. For advanced collectors, the 1928 threepence is one of those coins that mark the difference between an ordinary collection and one of prestige, proving that even small silver coins can carry immense historical and financial weight. Next up, the 1934 Australian threepence. The year 1934 was a pivotal moment in global history, with the world still in the grip of the Great Depression. Economies were struggling, unemployment was high, and money in any form was treasured. Against this backdrop, the 1934 Australian threepence emerged as another important silver coin of the George V era. Struck in sterling silver, it featured the king's portrait on the obverse and the coat of arms on the reverse, continuing the traditional design that had become so familiar to Australians. However, as with other threepences of the period, the survival rate of high-grade examples is exceptionally low. During the Depression, coins of all denominations were in constant circulation, and people made use of every last piece of currency they had. Small silver like the threepence saw especially heavy use for daily necessities. As a result, nearly all 1934 threepences were worn down significantly, with very few being set aside in pristine condition. Today, circulated pieces are relatively easy to find, but mint-state examples with strong details and brilliant luster are another story entirely. Collectors place a massive premium on these rare survivors, with the best examples reaching auction values of $105,000. What makes the 1934 issue so significant is the way it embodies the era. An ordinary coin that once represented survival in hard economic times has now become a sought-after rarity. For numismatists, owning a high-grade 1934 threepence is not just about filling a space in a collection, but about holding a tangible reminder of endurance through one of the hardest decades in modern history. Next up, the 1935 Australian threepence is a coin that tells a fascinating story of resilience and change in a nation that was still reeling from the economic depression of the early 1930s. Minted under the reign of King George V, this small silver coin carries the dignity of a monarch who had seen his empire through war, hardship and recovery. By 1935, Australia was struggling with unemployment and slow economic revival, but coinage remained an everyday reminder of the nation's connection to the British Crown and its determination to move forward. The 1935 threepence, struck in sterling silver, retains the classic design with George V's portrait on the obverse and the national coat of arms on the reverse, a symbol of pride and unity for Australians during uncertain times. Its scarcity comes from relatively lower mintage compared to earlier issues, and the fact that silver coins were heavily circulated during the Depression, leaving far fewer in pristine condition. Today, collectors treasure high-grade examples, especially those with sharp details, minimal wear, and original mint luster. At auction, superb specimens can reach as high as $95,000, making it one of the standout coins of its series. Its value is not just in silver content, but in the history it represents: the endurance of a young nation through adversity and the legacy of King George V's reign. Next up, the 1936 Australian threepence marks the very end of an era. It was the final year of issue under King George V, whose passing in January 1936 brought a close to a reign that had seen the world transformed by war, industrial progress, and global shifts in empire. What makes the 1936 threepence so special is that it sits at a pivotal historical moment, struck just before the abdication crisis that shook the British monarchy with King Edward VIII later that same year. The coin itself continues the familiar design, with George V's portrait on the obverse and the Australian coat of arms on the reverse. But for collectors, its significance lies in being the last chapter of the George V coinage in Australia. Because it was the end of a long reign, many Australians kept these coins as keepsakes, yet few were preserved in true mint state, as they were still primarily used in daily transactions. Over the decades, wear and damage diminished surviving numbers, leaving high-grade examples incredibly desirable. Collectors prize coins with brilliant, untouched surfaces and crisp strikes, as they represent the pinnacle of preservation. Today, top condition 1936. Threepence coins can fetch as much as 77,000, a remarkable value for such a small silver piece. It is both a numismatic treasure and a piece of transitional history, bridging the last years of George V with the turbulent changes of 1936, the year of three kings.